Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
We's back together again.
What's up?
Sorry for the delay on all of this content that we have not brung you in the last couple weeks. I subjected myself to severe torture by running a marathon on Sunday.
Yeah.
And that's all I could think about. And I was traveling. So, we're back. It's week 7. Can't believe it.
It's flown. I mean, we say it every year, but it really does fly by.
I just kind of wanted to stay. I mean, we got a long ways to go. We got like 15 weeks left, including playoffs.
Well, if you include playoffs, yeah.
Playoffs and Super Bowl. So we got some time left to enjoy football. But we're halfway through the regular season here in fantasy football just about. After this week, we'll be halfway through. So hopefully your fantasy leagues are going well. How you doing, Rick?
I'm doing good. Fantasy, in our home league 5-1, so can't complain.
Shut the frick up. I'm 4-2, and I got boned week 1.
Hey, that's good.
0.28 point loss. Winning percentage. You got to save your winning percentage since we switched to sleeper. You've been.
It's bad. So like that's the thing. We talked about it earlier a little bit before we started recording. You said my team is kind of garbage, although you took it back.
I did. I took it back.
It's not the best team I've had in the last couple of years, but I've been getting so unlucky with injuries that I feel like I was due for some luck. I do, but it's not as bad. And I feel like I was due to get some luck here. And I think I've gotten a little lucky this year, which is fine.
Oh, okay.
Fine by me.
There you go. Well,
just a little bit.
It's been an interesting season so far. So hopefully the success continues for Rick and I. I feel like I'm having a great season. I'm let's see, in my dynasty leagues here, 5-1,
Yeah.
3-3,
Okay.
4-2.
Yeah.
My 2 redrafts, 4-2, and 2-4 in this other one. I kind of I was playing Madden and forgot about the draft. So auto drafted.
That's
been trying to get this team to a good place.
Tough.
But I had Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown. Tyreek Hill has basically been non-existent on my team. How does this dude catch 6 passes and only get 9 points? That's wild.
Yeah. Who was that?
Tyreek.
Oh, yeah, because, they haven't scored a passing touchdown since week 1.
It's not even touchdowns. If you get 6 catches, you should at least have like 12 fantasy points.
That's true.
That's wild. Anyway.
He must have fumbled or something.
We have 6 must-start players for week 7. So 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 quarterback, 1 tight end. Rick's tight end start of the week. We will get that all to you in a second. Before we do, check our website. Force Fabit saying that again. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and like us on Facebook. You can find us on all social media platforms. Just type in the FF Champs Fantasy Champions. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, please leave a review and share this pod with your friends. Excuse me. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you may have for us. All right, you ready to talk about 6 must-start players for week 7?
Let's do it.
I love must-start players. Some of these guys might also preface this by saying some of these guys we have on this list are probably already in your starting lineup, but there are some guys that definitely aren't. So we'll do our best to get this. All right, I'll start with number 1. And that is Brian Robinson Jr. This is probably one of the guys on the list that you would say is probably starting in your starting lineup on a week-to-week basis. But I put him on this list because his matchup is just so good. So, like, if you're thinking about, he's also questionable. He's been limited in practice, so keep an eye on that. But he's been so good so far this year. We said 17, 14, 10, 20, and 13 that he's probably on a week-to-week basis starting in your starting lineup already. But he's playing Carolina. And Carolina, I mean, gosh dang, got to be the worst team in the whole league right now. 31.9 fantasy points per game has been given up to the running back position by Carolina. So for me, Brian Robinson probably already starting in your lineup, but as a must-start player, like if you have Brian Robinson, find a way to get him into your starting lineup this week because there's a really good chance, especially when there's not really much else on the team besides Austin Eckler. Brian Robinson will have a very explosive and big week. I mean, this past Sunday, he played 30% of the snaps and he got hurt in the game, his last game. He scored 2 touchdowns on 7 carries. So
that's insane, dude.
So Brian Robinson, I mean, I think he's a plotter and he's hyper inefficient at times, but this will be a good week against Carolina.
Yeah, and he's actually been the most efficient he's been his whole career this year. I think it's the Jane Daniels effect and Cliff Kingsbury for sure. But he's been good this year, probably in your lineups. And if he's not, he should be because Carolina, matchup we've been targeting all year, they have the worst run defense in the league. So you get a guy who's been a touchdown machine, who's been pretty good this year versus a team that is dead last against running backs. It's just a recipe for success. He should be a must start. He's a lock in any lineup that you have him in. I was actually surprised I do have him in a Dynasty League.
Yeah.
And he's going to be my RB1 this week.
Oh. There you go. All right, Rick's throwing his opinion on the line in a fantasy matchup by putting him in the lineup.
Well, I didn't say he's going to be RB1 in the whole league, just in my Dynasty team, because my other running back is Jonathan Taylor, who might not play this week.
There you go. That's not good. All right, let's talk about number 2 is Tony Pollard at Buffalo. Rick, give me your thoughts on Tony Pollard so far.
Pollard has been sneaky good because the Titans have sucked, but Pollard in the run game has actually been decent for Tennessee this year. And they're playing against a Buffalo team that you might think, and I had said this before the show, like, oh, they're going to blow them out. Probably won't be a competitive game. Probably will be in a negative game script, all that. Not in love with the matchup. But then Morgan told me that Buffalo gives up how many points per game to running backs? Was it like 29?
29 fantasy points.
29 points per game to running backs. That is juicy. That is ridiculous. So even if it is kind of a weird game script situation for Tennessee, as long as they run the ball a decent amount, doesn't have to be a lot, but just a decent amount, Pollard gets like 14, 15 carries on the ground. He should be very, very efficient. And should be more involved in pass game. This week he had 3 catches for -5 yards. I don't think that's happening again. He still finished the game with 17 fantasy points. So you give him 3 catches again. This time he goes for 30 yards. That will probably help the efficiency out. So I like Pollard a lot this week. He's been pretty good this year and has a very good matchup.
Yeah. I think for me with Pollard, it's mainly the matchup. I don't know. What I don't know is if he was drafted. What round? Like 5th? 6th?
I think later, like 6th or 7th, yeah.
Yeah, so he was drafted maybe as like a low-end starter.
In our league, he was a late 6th, and the running backs were flying. So in most leagues, he was like an 8th rounder.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's starting in a lot of leagues. I mean, I would imagine with some of the running back injuries and some of the situations going around in the NFL, with the running back position being kind of not good, Pollard has probably found your starting lineup in some way, shape, or form on a week-to-week basis. And it has been a mixed bag a little bit. He's been efficient in a few games and not so efficient in others. He had a 5-point game against Green Bay a few weeks ago. But for the most part, he's been a startable guy. So hopefully he's been in your starting lineup while he's had some of these really good games. But Buffalo, I don't really know what's going on with them. Like Rick just referenced, the 29 points per game given up to the running back position is just, it's piss poor. It's bad. I'm not really sure why that's happening because they seem to be a decent defense for the most part. So they just haven't been good against the run. And that opens up a lot of stuff for Tony Pollard coming into this game. There isn't, like, Tajay Spears has been there, but he hasn't really produced much. So I would imagine a lot of these fantasy points are going to go to Pollard. I'm not saying he's going to have a 29-point game, but the chances of him having another 17, 18-point performance are kind of high this week. So I definitely get him in your starting lineup against Buffalo. Another thing to keep an eye on, too, that Rick referenced before the show, I don't know if he said it when he was talking a second ago because the show host wasn't listening, but against Buffalo.
I did bring this up. The potential blowout.
Yeah, potential blowout factor. Okay, Rick brought it up. We're good. So just keep an eye on that because, Tennessee, have they been blown out this year?
That's actually a good question. I don't think they've lost a lot of games.
Yeah, they lost a lot of games.
But I don't know if they've really been blown out. And then one quick note before we move on.
Yeah.
Tajay Spears left the game last week in the second quarter and has not practiced this week. So Pollard might be getting 30 touches this week.
Okay, so that should be a lot. But yeah, I think their best shot of having any chance in this game would probably be to hand the ball off. And they'll probably try to do that early. Just hope the Bills don't come out to a real early lead because then you have other issues. But anyway, that's the start of the week at running back. Next up, Pop Douglas. Woo! A Patriot.
We got a Patriot player on here.
At Jacksonville in London. Basically Jacksonville home 2.0. They got a following over there in London. And the London Jaguars. That's coming to a home near you at some point. Unless
back-to-back weeks.
Unless they build that stadium that they've been talking about.
Yeah.
But we'll see. The London Jaguars over here. But Pop Douglas traveling to London this week. This past week, he's been like, I mean, some of us thought like, because Rick and I were talking about before the season, so preseason, about Pop Douglas being a potential like late round draft selection. Patriots don't really have a lot of receivers. Yeah. Drake May plays. It could be beneficial to him. He started the season real slow. Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots, for whatever reason, was not getting him hyper involved in the game. He got enough blowback from the fans and the media that week 3, they were like, maybe we should get the ball to him. He had 14 points, 9 targets, 7 catches, 69 yards. And then once again, another week where he just wasn't involved against San Fran. But the last 2 weeks, he's had 9 targets, 6 catches. This past week, he had 9 targets, 6 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown from Drake May, 21 fantasy points. So Drake May elevates Pop Douglas's game automatically just by him walking on the field. And it's clear when you listen to Drake May in a press conference, he's talked about Pop. He just brings him up in press conferences without being coaxed. So, he likes Pop Douglas, I think, just a little bit. So the target share is going to be there, obviously, on a week-to-week basis. The Patriots are trying to find ways to get him on the field because their whole offense, they run a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, and Pop Douglas is mostly a slot, flanker, and he's not on the field on 2 wide receiver set possessions. So, it's kind of a tough scenario for Pop in those instances, but they've talked about finding ways to get him on the field when he's not in a 3 wide receiver set and they're not in gun, which is good news for Pop Douglas. You want to see that. You hope the snap percentage goes up. But either way, Pop is definitely an interesting player going into the next couple weeks. But this particular week, he has a matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been the second worst against wide receivers, giving up 36 fantasy points a game to that position. So it should be a game where Drake May comes out, is able to get the ball to Pop Douglas. He's able to score some fantasy points, and you'll see a much more efficient Pop than you've seen in the last couple weeks. And it should lead to a 14-15 fantasy point outing. So if you have guys on bye weeks and you need that play, I think Pop is a perfect guy for your lineup.
Yeah, I mean, we had hope with Jalen Polk being potentially the best receiver in the room, but it's very clear Demario Douglas is the best wide receiver on the Patriots right now. Mm-hmm. And against Jacksonville in a great matchup. And the big thing, too, is Drake May is now the quarterback. And with Brissett, they were not throwing the ball down the field. They were actually just limited in general with throwing the ball. With May, the offense is opened up. May will take shots down the field. Mm-hmm. And that's only good things for the rest of the Patriots offense. But in this case, Demario Douglas, who even without May, in 3 of the last 4 games has had 9 targets. I think against Jacksonville, we should see that number around 9 targets. Maybe he gets a little less, but should be very efficient. I think he's in line for at least like 6 or 7 catches for 60 yards. And then if he had a touchdown in there like this week, great. But even if he doesn't, as you said, should probably get like 14 fantasy points just from that.
Sweet. All right, let's talk about Ladd McConkey at the Arizona Cardinals. Rick, what are your thoughts on Ladd?
Yeah, Ladd's had an up and down year, rookie wide receiver for the Chargers. But one thing to know with Ladd is the Chargers have been a very run-heavy team this year. But when they are kind of in throwing situations, Ladd has been pretty good. And
he's been the guy.
Yeah, he's been the guy. I think he leads the team in targets this season. He had 8 this week against a tough matchup against Denver. Only had 4 catches for 43 yards. But he still had moments. Like he had a good week against Kansas City. He had a good week 1 against the Raiders. So when the passing is there, Ladd is typically the first option. He does lead the team in targets this year. So you go against Arizona, who really struggles against the pass. This could finally be a game we see the Chargers offense kind of open up a little bit. And if they do that, that's only good for Ladd, who is the top target of the team. And if he consistently is getting like those 7-8 targets like he has the last couple of weeks, you get him in a good matchup against Arizona. You should see a kind of a similar week to Pop, I think, where he gets like 6 catches for 60, 70 yards and then could potentially throw in a touchdown in there as well.
Yeah, Ladd's an interesting dude. Might talk about him a little bit later this week. Trade targets. But he's been kind of like this inconsistent player that you hope is going to have this breakout at some point.
Right.
And like Rick said, it's the offense itself is just kind of slow and plodding because they run the ball a lot. And it's not like they don't have opportunities to pass. It's just they try to move the ball a little bit slower down the field, run the ball, and run play action off of that. That's just similar to what they did in college. Or not not they, but what Harbaugh did in college with Michigan. So I think for Ladd, that kind of has held things back a little bit, but he also hasn't had complete snap percentages in the 80s and 90s. He's been on and off the field. So you want to see him reach that, but when he's on the field, he's been the guy that's been targeted. Like it's clear that he's like Herbert's dude. So at some point the breakout will happen. If you're getting 7-8 targets a game on 70% snap percentage, at some point, if you hit 80 to 90% snap percentage, you will get 9, 10, 12 targets a game, somewhere in that vicinity. So I really like Ladd McConkey for that reason, but he is going up against Arizona this week, and Arizona has given up a total of 30 fantasy points a game to the wide receiver position. So do I think Ladd's going to get all 30 of those? Absolutely not, but he should be around the same range that I just referenced, 15 fantasy points. Any more thoughts on Ladd?
No, I will say we have kind of breaking news. I mean, it's not like anything crazy.
Oh,
I don't know. Do we still have the button?
Yeah, of course I got the button.
Breaking news.
Yeah, I need to fix that. I need to get
there we go.
One. We need a new button.
Rashid Shaheed, who's kind of had a breakout year, wide receiver 22 in fantasy. He had moments last year, but he's really kind of come on this year. Is expected to miss the season, out 4 to 6 months with a knee injury.
Where'd he get that?
So, I don't know. Because he played 87 or 81% of the snaps last week. So maybe it was last week.
Saints might just need a tank.
Yeah, they probably should, but
right now,
I don't know if they will.
What is his name? Bob Means? What, Bob?
Yeah, so I don't know if the Saints receivers, these random guys that they have, become must-adds for next week. But
what the hell happened to Chris Olave? Is he dead?
Yeah, he's injured, and even when he's been healthy this year, he has not been involved.
Maybe the Patriots can make a trade.
Yeah, he should be a Patriots trade target. He's actually had some flashes, but yeah, I'd be in on Chris Olave for sure.
Interesting. Let's talk about the quarterback start, and then Rick will give you his tight end start of the week. Anthony Richardson versus Miami, and I you know what, I will say, Richardson. I mean, is he still starting in people's lineups?
Like, I don't think so.
I'm kind of interested because I haven't really fully looked at his numbers all season. I know he's been like kind of in and out of the lineup, and he got hurt. He's a full participant in practice this week, But the 2 weeks before he got hurt, he had 7 fantasy points against Chicago in a full game, and then he got hurt like in the first quarter against Pittsburgh, 5 fantasy points, and then has missed the last 2 weeks with Joe Flacco starting. So he should be back this week, which is probably exciting for a lot of people to get him back in the starting lineup. Now, some people might be hesitant because if you take a look at the fantasy numbers for the quarterback position, he's playing Miami, who supposedly has the toughest matchup in fantasy football, giving up 9 fantasy points a game.
Right.
Yeah,
if you really look at the Dolphins' defense,
not that good. Not that good.
No. And it's funny because they do that against quarterbacks, but do you know where they rank fantasy-wise?
Where?
Just in fantasy points? They're 26th. They have the 26th fantasy defense.
So what I'm thinking is that in a lot of situations, Miami actually has a pretty horrendous run defense. And what happens against them is a lot of teams just run the ball into the ground.
Yes.
Run up the score a little bit, and then
it's what happened with Tennessee and Seattle.
Yeah, and
even Buffalo.
They haven't really played anyone that is super prolific passing the ball wise. So to me, in my mind, I think despite this being the reason why I have Anthony Richardson as a start is that I think this particular week, he's back, hopefully. If he's not back, ignore the start. But he's likely back this week. And you're probably looking at these numbers here, the 9 fantasy points a game given up to the quarterback position from Miami. If you're smart, you're saying this is a tough matchup and all of that stuff, right? I wouldn't be hesitant to start Anthony Richardson just because I don't think Miami's defense is truly that good. And I think Anthony Richardson provides a lot more to fantasy football than just passing. He's a freaking rushing quarterback. So if you have a rushing quarterback of the caliber of Anthony Richardson, he should be in your starting lineup. He'll probably get you 18 to 20 fantasy points this week, and you'll have a decent week from your quarterback, which is what you're looking for at this point, especially if you haven't had Richardson and you drafted him in the 4th round. So I wouldn't be worried about the Miami Dolphins matchup. I think he'll have a good week, and you won't regret it. Start Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, with Richardson, it's interesting because he's been so bad at times, and on paper, it's not a good matchup. But with him, it's not just the passing numbers you have to look at; it's the rushing. And as you said, Miami's really bad against the rush this year. Yeah. But I think that also helps with Richardson because there will be plenty of opportunities for him to run in this game. Mm-hmm. And with Richardson, he obviously doesn't have to be efficient in the passing game because in week 1 he was terrible too in the passing game, and he still had 28 fantasy points. Because he had 2 deep balls that were touchdowns and he had a rushing touchdown. He had 56 rushing yards. Mm-hmm. I think that's very, very possible this week against Miami. If he can just get 1 or 2 big plays passing wise that result in touchdowns, and then he just has a big rushing game, it doesn't matter if he throws 50% of his passes. He just needs those big plays for fantasy, and I think he will. I think this is a week where he can bounce back. As we said, Miami's pretty good against quarterbacks this year, but they really... that number's kind of inflated because, one, they played Jacoby Brissett last week, and I think Brissett had no fantasy points in that game. And then in some of the other games, against Buffalo, Josh Allen was killing them, and he didn't even play in the 4th quarter, and they ended up only allowing 25 points in the game. And at the end of the day, the stats don't look terrible, but they were getting killed in that game, and if they really pushed for it, Buffalo would have scored a lot more points, and so would have Josh Allen. So there's been times Seattle game was the same way. They were up 24-3 in the 4th quarter and didn't really do anything after that. I think they ran the ball a couple times and punted. So Geno had a good game, but the fantasy numbers didn't look good. So the stats are a little misleading there, I think. So there is some opportunity here for Richardson to bounce back after being away for a couple weeks.
Okay, Rick, give us our tight end start of the week.
Yeah, my tight end start of the week. I got David Njoku playing against the Bengals. It's kind of hard to get anybody going in this Cleveland offense, but Njoku has actually been decent since coming back. He missed a lot of time this year. Came back in the first game against Washington, only had a 42% snap percentage. This week, finally got he was finally getting the work that you expected. Played mostly a full game, and he had 7 targets. Now, didn't put up anything crazy. Only had 8 fantasy points, but the 7 targets is important because now Amari Cooper is gone, And outside of Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, he's the number one option. I think it's debatable that he might be the number one option in the offense. Like him or Judy's probably going to be the number one option, but he's guaranteed, I think, to get at least minimum 6 targets a week now with Amari Cooper no longer there. And even though the offense stinks, you look for volume, especially at tight end, because at tight end, you're getting, if you get 10, 11 points a week just off receptions and yards, like that's pretty good. So I think this week against the Bengals, it's going to be a good game script where they're going to be behind in the game. They're going to be passing the ball. And David Njoku without Amari Cooper should get a lot of targets in this game.
All right, there you go. There is your must-start players for Week 7. We have another show coming for you later this week, most likely tomorrow. It's going to be our must-sit players of the week, so be sure to check that episode out. Like, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you for listening, guys. Enjoy your night. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.